Hi everyone, my name is Amber Washington and I'm going to speak to you about learning to sort of gauge your audience and to tailor your speeches for who you will be speaking to. So there are several components to your audience that you should look into when you're delivering a speech. You should look into the age, the gender, the affectional orientation, the educational and intellectual level, and there are other factors that come into play such as religion, cultural factors, especially important when you are doing something overseas, income, relationship status, politics. These are all things that can come into play but don't always necessarily come into play. They're just things that you may have to consider depending on your topic. So, obviously, with age, there are certain topics that will be of more interest to someone who is in their 20s as opposed to someone in their 50s. If you're delivering a speech on employee benefits, you would probably want to touch on all of them. If it's new hire orientation, there may be things that you would go into more deeply. If it were a younger crowd and perhaps there were things they weren't eligible for at that time, you may be able to gloss over and say, you're not 45 yet, you're not eligible for this. Um, Also, your gender, men versus women, could also come into play as far as your style and the language you use. In my experience, I have learned that the men that I've spoken with, are more detailed. They don't like the fluff, if you'll call it. Some people like the fluff, some people don't like the fluff. But sometimes men just sort of, they just want the details. Women sort of like the background. They want to know all of it. Again, that's in my experience. Affectional orientation is something that may or may not affect your audience. It's formerly called their sexual orientation, and you don't want to make any stereotypes as to, lesbians, homosexual men. So you just want to be very careful of that should it come up in your topic, which it may not. The intellectual level, you want to make sure to use language that would be understood by your group. You don't want to use words that may not commonly be known if you're doing a presentation to high schoolers or, generally people who aren't very educated and who may not, people may not know some words. I remember when I was in elementary school and I was running for student council and I did this speech and everyone said, oh, it's great. Well, the group was broken up into grade levels. And so I wish someone would have told me that during my speech preparation, because the kindergartners, because my speech was a little long, the kindergartners were kind of like, they got bored. They didn't care. It was like kindergarten through third grade. So when I read my speech to my teacher, she should have said to me, maybe you want to cut this out, or maybe you don't want to do this. And then for the fourth and fifth graders, this may be of more interest to them. So there's that. There's always consider that. Religious views may or may not come into play. It may have nothing to do with the topic. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. If it does, make sure you research it. Cultural, like I said, especially important if you are doing something for people coming in overseas, or if you're going overseas to try to sell your business, and if you don't know the customs of that country or their culture and the way they conduct themselves, you could get yourself in trouble. You could really embarrass yourself and it could not turn out good. Other things: income levels, relationship status, single, married, divorced, single parent, that type of things. Take that into consideration. And also politics, if that would come into play at all. Watch your political jokes. That's always a good one. So those are just a couple things, and there are tons more. Our textbook covers them, and of course, you can always Google it, Yahoo it, Bing it, whatever you need to do. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a fabulous day. Thank you for listening to me.